Hi, I'm David Preston. This video, along with companion videos on the first weeks of school and designing for empathy, will be hosted on this site throughout the 2020-21 school year so that teachers, parents, students, and community members can access these materials whenever you find them helpful. If you have questions about what you see, or if you'd like to get further information or make suggestions and contributions of your own, or even suggest topics for future videos, please drop me a line by commenting to this post or by sending me an email at dpreston@smjuhsd.org. Today's topic, the bathroom pass is dead. We're all in a state of shock. We're all grieving. We're all trying to work things out. We wish that school was open. We miss the classroom and seeing each other. We miss having the events that so many of our young people have looked forward to for the longest time. It's rough, and we're all dealing with the resulting stress and anxiety and worse, the economic realities, the political realities, and of course the health realities. But in the midst of all of that, it's really important to try, even though we don't have the choice to go back to school, to take the chance that we're being given to make a meaningful year for our students. And to that end, I'd like to go back a step to the pre-pandemic days, because one of the things that I think people are overlooking is that school wasn't always perfect. I know, it's not nice to say that, but I don't mean it as a criticism. I mean that because there were very real constraints on how we could teach in physical classrooms. We had a lot of students. I have 176 students that I'm about to meet for the first time, and usually I would meet them in 4 or 5 groups of 30 to 40 each. And in that kind of an environment, there's only so much individual attention I can give. So as I get into this, we'll talk about 7 specific advantages of virtual learning. But before I do that, I want to go back to this article. In 2014, a teacher became a high school learning coach, and her first task was to shadow a 10th grader and then a 12th grader as they moved through their days. I'll put up a link in the notes to this article so that you can see for yourself. But the 3 major takeaways from this teacher were that, first of all, she was exhausted. And she wasn't exhausted from physical rigor. She was exhausted from sitting still and sitting and sitting throughout the course of her day. So one recommendation she made back way before campus closure was that we spend less time instructing and break things up so that students can move their bodies and interact and talk and breathe. The second thing was that not only was she exhausted from sitting, but she was exhausted from being passive and silent. Third, she was exhausted from feeling like if she wasn't passive and silent, that she might actually be a nuisance. Because teachers present themselves so often, understandably, we are busy people. We are stressed out people a lot of the time. And so any interruption that distracts us or takes us away from the tasks or the instruction that we're trying to complete is a distraction and an interruption. And what is a question except an interruption? So it's with these things in mind that I'd like to start thinking about what virtual learning is and how it gives us some opportunities that we just didn't have before. First of all, in the spring, virtual learning along with e-learning, blended learning, online learning, distance learning, hybrid learning, flex learning, all of these terms were being thrown around. But the truth of the matter is that the spring wasn't about any of that. The spring was a hastily patched together response to an immediate crisis. Nobody planned in advance. Nobody trained in online pedagogy or strategy. And nobody agreed to it, teachers or students. We all did what we had to do. One thing I'm trying to learn in my life is slowing down. And it seems like over the summer, a lot of people went through meetings and had conversations. But here we are the week before school, and I talk with a lot of teachers every day. And people are racing into virtual learning. So I want to pause and define the term before we go any further. Virtual learning is distance learning. Distance learning is a form of learning in which teacher and learner are physically separate. Virtual learning is distance learning that takes place in an online environment with electronic study content that is designed for self-paced, asynchronous, which means not connected in time, or live web conferencing, synchronous, connected in time, online teaching and tutoring. So with that definition in mind, the way I see it, there are 7 primary advantages of virtual learning. Now, I'm not suggesting that virtual learning is superior to classroom learning if those are the only 2 choices, but virtual learning on its own gives us opportunities that we wouldn't normally have. So let's talk about those. The first is self-discipline and time management. Then we'll get into improved focus and concentration, self-pacing, engagement, personalized instruction and support, power of the network, and feedback and outcomes. We'll take a break after the engagement piece, and we'll come back for part 2, beginning with personalized instruction and support. Now, I don't know about you, but self-discipline and time management can be rough. In fact, the last time I worked from home was when I was a management consultant over 20 years ago. And for a few years, let's just say that my refrigerator could have been a little further away and it would have been better for my waistline. And let's just also say that at that point in my career, I was enough of a go-getter that I didn't really know how to turn off. And it was hard for my stress level. It was hard for some of the people around me because I was constantly tired. I was staying up all hours. Work didn't just follow me home. It was there when I woke up. So one of the things that I think is important for us is to talk with our students about goals, to have an opening conversation about what is this year all about for us? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And goals are one of the most fun topics. I'll show you how I present this to students.
Perdió Raíci y ahora de contragolpe Donovan, se le va larga Donovan, la quiere por derecha Altidor, al área viene y le cita con el arquero, Donovan, ¡gol! ¡Gol!
All right, I think we get the idea. But how do you not watch that and just enjoy yourself? That is the most delicious feeling in humanity, to set yourself a task and to complete it in that kind of a winning fashion. And our year can be about that too. If a student has a goal of losing 20 pounds, the choice between the piece of broccoli and the chocolate cake just got easier. If the choice was to have a goal of skill mastery, being able to write better, have a resume, get a better grade in a course that's been frustrating, understand something that's always seemed challenging, well, that makes everything else a bit easier. And sometimes it's not as obvious as it seems. You can see in the graphic below the soccer game that Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about one of the problems in education is that too many teachers and students are focused on the grade. And I guess the best example I can give you is Mike Krzyzewski, championship-winning coach at Duke basketball, gives his players a task at the beginning of every season. They write their goals individually and as a team. And you would think, well, how simple would that be? Get a certain number of points and rebounds, win a certain number of games, win the NCAA championship. How many goals could you have? But that's not it. Their goals had to be personal because otherwise, how could they possibly connect with them? And they had to be specific because otherwise, how would they know when they had completed them? So setting goals with our students and having those conversations is one opportunity in virtual learning that we don't always have when we've got 40 students at a time moving through our classrooms. In the context of goals, limiting screen time and hours in front of a screen makes a different kind of sense. If my goal, and this is from my heart, is to make it to June in a healthy way, in a reasonably sane way, in a way that supports every single one of my students and my colleagues, well, I'm going to have to make some choices. I can't operate 22 hours a day and maintain that level of energy and that level of patience that would be required to make those things happen. So first of all, I know that I need a good night's sleep. And to do that, I need to turn off my devices at least an hour, preferably 2. Not the night shift thing that takes out the blue light. I'm talking turn it off so that I can get the sleep that I need to recharge my batteries and come back strong the next day. Otherwise, in the absence of that goal, if I'm a teacher telling a student to turn off your screen, that sounds like a lecture. Now that also means I need to be compassionate and empathetic when it comes to my students' experiences. I am not going to ask my students to sit in front of a screen for 6 to 8 hours a day. That's cruel and unusual. What I will ask is that they make sure to tune in to our synchronous meetings and my asynchronous lessons when I put them up, so that we can maximize the benefit of our interaction and help them understand and demonstrate that understanding in a way that creates the most sense of value. The other things on this list, probably common sense, but maybe not. Movement. If you're sitting in front of your screen for more than a half an hour at a time, get up and stretch. Do some jumping jacks, do some push-ups, do some air squats, and set a timer on your device. Where I say creating routines and using devices, too often we find ourselves working for those little screens. The push notifications take us away from what we intended. Sometimes I turn on my device and I find myself answering a message and looking at something that took me down into a different train of thought than I intended in the first place. What notifications are good for is reminding us of the things that we want to accomplish without having to think too hard on the process. So if I know I have a project due next Friday and it's going to take me 4 to 6 hours, well, maybe I'll set my notification for the next Monday or Tuesday to remind myself to review my calendar and give myself enough time to do that well. Students don't come by this information naturally. They're not taught. We don't really have courses on the internet or on using our electronic devices. And so it becomes important to explicitly have these conversations out loud and to model that kind of behavior, because it makes me better when I do that. But also, it gives my students the idea that they're not alone and I'm not talking at them. That balance piece, so important. Yes, school is important. Yes, work is important. But just like when we're on campus physically, it's not our whole lives. And it's really important to have healthy boundaries around that. We can work all day long and all night long. I've just put in a few all-nighters myself getting ready for the school year. It's rough. So make sure that you're checking those boxes and that you're making space, even if you use your calendar to make an appointment with your loved ones. Make space. Self-care. Make space. And for God's sake, have fun. I will defend fun to the death because it's an important part of our lives. And too often we walk around exhausted and stressed out, and I don't see the wisdom in that. The strategies and tactics all flow from the goals that we set. And a big part of this is improving our focus and our concentration. We're all multitaskers. If a student is sitting in a class, being present in the classroom, having that observational present from us is one way that keeps students focused. But in their homes, they may not have that. So how do we encourage students to be more mindful? Well, when I'm in the physical classroom, I spend a minute of mindfulness each day with my students. We call it Your Mom. Let's talk about your mom. I'll get me out of the way so you can see more of these. I use different prompts. Sometimes I'll emphasize the breath. Sometimes we'll focus on a word or a thought. A lot of the time I'll focus on physical sensations. Like right now, for example, wherever you're sitting, I hope that you're comfortable. But feel your feet contact the surface beneath you, whether it's a floor or the ground. Feel your feet all the way from your heels to your toes. Can you? And when you feel that, all that there ever was is this moment. There is no past, there is no future, it's just right now. Sometimes, just being more present can make the rest of our experiences a higher quality because we're more focused. This sort of thinking and this sort of practice has been shown to increase health, lower blood pressure, lower tension, also increase test scores and reading comprehension. I encourage you to experiment with this on your own. We can also talk more about this in the Zoom on Thursday at 10 a.m. And as we go on throughout the year, I encourage you to experiment with your students. In fact, when I was looking for those prompts, I ran across this. This was on the Monday after campus closed, and I wrote, "Hi everyone. I hope you're enjoying the rain at home this morning. As you know by now, our school is closed for the next few weeks, at least, so that we can help prevent the spread of the coronavirus. This is an important step. I am continuing to collect information to share, and I will update the coronavirus/COVID-19 page on the blog as I learn more. For now, I'm glad that the government and school officials collaborated with medical experts to support the health of our community. Although I'll miss seeing you in person, we have what we need to continue learning, communicating, and collaborating online. Starting tonight, March 16th, I will post the following day's agenda by 10 p.m. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't know about the closure on Friday. I would have had you take your journals home instead of turning them in. But you can start a new notebook or write on paper. And then I go on from there, but at the bottom, if you see, it says for your mom, for your minute of mindfulness, quote, learning begins with me. As a mantra, what more valuable concept could we ask our learners to adopt? During the spring semester, I watched as my stepson wrangled the end of his 8th grade year through his Chromebook. And he spent a lot of time on things that were helpful and that helped him learn. And I was glad to see that. But because of his school's approach, which was very structured and not at all choice-based, it was mandatory, he also had to spend a lot of time on things that he could have done more quickly. And my experience in watching students turn in work, I can get 3 assignments from 3 different students and see quality, and they're not correlated with the time the student spent. Sometimes the best work I receive hit the student like a flash and they got their work done in minutes where it took another student an hour. Virtual learning gives us chances to offer our students choices. And because of self-pacing, if a student feels complete and they're doing great work, why would I want them to have more seat time? Just because seat time was a concept based on Carnegie and Frederick Taylor doing time motion study work in factories, that doesn't make any sense to me. In fact, I don't want to spend any more time on self-pacing. Let's move on. Let's talk about engagement. Engagement can be done synchronously. This is an image of my students with me online. I was on a Zoom call in the spring. And what a wonderful expression. Here we see a student on the upper left-hand corner who wanted to be online, on camera, so I blurred her out for the purpose of this presentation. The student below her used a childhood picture. I blurred her eyes out a little bit, but I wanted to keep that smile in the heart hands. You got my ugly mug on the top, another student using an initial, a dandelion, or just being anonymous. I think it's important to make it clear that our students should have a choice whether or not they appear on screen. I want to make it easy for our students to feel engaged at whatever level they're comfortable. Some of our students may not be proud to show us their homes, or they might have other reasons to be private. I want that to be okay. And I also want to show our students that I trust them. Some of our students show up and it's difficult to be online together at the same time. So we'll talk about asynchronous. And again, with the synchronous communication, the classroom is king, right? Everybody's in the same place at the same time. But the synchronous meetings that we have here are twofold valuable. First, they're valuable for the people who show up for similar reasons that the classroom conversations are valuable. But they're also valuable because, just like this, I can record them and make them available for anyone to access when it's convenient for them. Over and above, though, virtual learning gives me the opportunity to communicate asynchronously. Here we see a conversation between 2 students in the comments section of a blog post on the course blog. And I underlined in red the dates and the times. This is just simply delicious. First of all, I want to point out that these dates are in June and July of 2013. Second of all, if you look at the first one, June 11th, the second person comes back with an answer on June 12th. And for whatever her reason, the first person either forgot or didn't revisit this, or maybe had that one idea a month later on July 7th. And then the second person comes back on August 13th, a month after that. Why is that significant? Because when you read the thread, it reads like a conversation that's happening in real time. This is something that we simply cannot do in the classroom. Now, because of this, synchronous, asynchronous, engagement, whole person, goals, now we have an opportunity, instead of a one-size-fits-all, to tailor the experience for each student. And that's where we'll start part 2. Stay tuned.